we might never know how God calls us to be the change that we want to see in the world. You might never know the difference you can make in someone's life just by living your own story in the best possible way. My name is Sister Melissa Dwyer, and it's time to make a difference. If I think about my life and how God has led me in this space of making a difference in the world, when I was much younger, I had no idea that life would lead me on the path that it has. But I guess this is the essence of what it means to make a difference. We might never know how God calls us to be the change that we want to see in the world. We might not ever realize the way that God can use us to make a difference in the lives of those we meet. What I'd like to highlight to you throughout this series is that it's not so much in the big things that we do. What's important is the small things and how we can make a difference in the lives of people that we meet each and every day. When I was 5 years old, I had a dream. My dream was to represent Australia at the Olympic Games. I thought I was going to grow up and be this great sportswoman. I was throwing javelin, and from the time that I was 5, I was training, getting better and better at my chosen sport, trying to be an Olympic athlete, having that dream of throwing javelin for Australia. But God had a different dream for me. Actually, when I was in primary school and secondary school, if anyone asked me about making a difference, or even about prayer or going to church, I thought it was a complete waste of time. My life was focused on sport, on being the best, and I was driven by the desire for success in the way that the world sees it. When I finished school, I got a really good result at the end of year 12. I got into university to study to be a physical education teacher because this was what I wanted to do with my life. And slowly I was moving up the ranks of my sport. And yet when I reached first year uni, it was at that point that I realized that something was missing in my life. Seemingly, in the eyes of the world, I had everything. I was good at sport, I was good at school, I'd got into university, I had heaps of friends. In the eyes of the world, I was successful. And yet inside me, something was missing. I came to know in first year university that what was missing in my life was Jesus Christ. What was missing in my life was that personal relationship with our Lord. In the eyes of the world, I had everything, and yet deep within, I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe that I was worth anything. I didn't believe that I could make a difference in anyone's life, not even in my own. It was at that time, when I felt very low and had quite a low self-esteem, that I came to know Jesus. I came to realize that the only one who could satisfy my heart was Jesus Christ. So I started going to church, not because my parents made me, but because I wanted to. I wanted to have that personal relationship with our Lord. So going to church, having a life of prayer, became part of who I was. I had no intention, however, of ending up as a religious. I was going to Mass, I was still doing sport, I was still doing university, still having heaps of friends, and incorporated faith into my life, but had no intention of becoming a nun. That was until I had the opportunity to go to Africa for the first time. In the year 2000, I went as a volunteer to Tanzania. And I had the chance to go with the Canossian sisters volunteering at a shelter for homeless young people. When I left for Africa, to be honest, I didn't think that I was going really to help people. I wanted to try and make a small difference, but I didn't know the ways that God would use me in that space. I'd like to share with you 2 very personal stories of how God used that 1 month in Tanzania to help me realize that I too could make a difference, not for myself, but in serving God with my life. And this is the invitation for each one of us. Not to make a difference for ourselves, for our own glory, but to make a difference for God. So I went to Tanzania as a 19-year-old. My first time overseas, an opportunity for free flights, free food, free accommodation to see Africa. And from there, my life was changed. It was changed by two individuals. One was a little homeless girl called Flora. She was 5 years old when I met her, and she couldn't speak any English, and I couldn't speak much Kiswahili, which was the language of Tanzania. But sometimes you don't need words to communicate with people. So she was left in a basket when she was born, and every day I would go to the shelter to visit her. And every morning, without fail, she would come running to meet me. And she would call my name. She would say, "Melissa, Melissa," and she would jump into my arms for a hug. One morning, this little girl didn't come running, and I wondered where she was. When I went looking for her, I found her lying in the dirt behind a shed, so sick with malaria that she couldn't raise her head to greet me. And 2 days later, Flora died of cerebral malaria. As a 19-year-old, this turned my world upside down. I'd been very sheltered growing up. I'd had everything that I needed. And here was this little girl who I'd come face to face with, who I'd connected with, who was dying very, very close to me. It made me look at things in such a different way. The second young person who impacted on my life in a very profound way was Nema. Nema was 11 years old, and she was also left in a basket when she was born. Her parents simply didn't want her. She was being raised at this shelter for homeless young people, and nearly every day she was being abused by the boys that were there. She was being treated in horrendous ways. And when I saw her suffering, and when I heard of her suffering, it made me so angry. It made me angry because I felt useless. I had this burning desire in me to make a difference. And the story of Nema made me realize that I couldn't make a difference. It frustrated me because I couldn't end her suffering. When it was time for me to leave Tanzania and come back to Australia, Nema begged to come back with me. She wanted to be my servant, to carry my bags and tie my shoes. And I had to tell this little girl who called me her mother that there was nothing I could do to help her, because you can't just pick up children from Africa and bring them to Australia. It broke my heart. And I remember sitting in the chapel of the sisters the evening before I left for Australia in this state of getting angry with God. And I remember saying to God, why am I so useless? Why can I do nothing to make a difference? And it was in that moment that I had a powerful experience of God making me realize that there was something I could do, that I could give my life completely for God and completely for the poor by becoming a Canossian Daughter of Charity. And so, almost instantaneously, I decided that I didn't want to pursue my Olympic dream any longer. I wanted to give my life completely, radically, unconditionally to make a difference. So I came back to Australia, and that's what I did. I entered religious life and went through the stages of formation, desiring to respond to God's call for me. I made my first profession of vows in 2005. After 3 years, I had the chance to go back to Africa, where I worked for 7 years in Malawi, a really small Eastern African country. In 2016, Malawi was the poorest country in our world. So materially, the people have very, very little. But in terms of spirit, in terms of faith, in terms of gratitude, they taught me so very much. I learnt so many powerful lessons there about how I'm called to make a difference. Again, not by doing huge things. It wasn't about building buildings. It wasn't about changing the world. It was about the small, little things that I was able to do to make a difference in the lives of others. During my time in Africa, I was blessed to be able to be principal of a girls' school of 500. It was the opportunity each and every day to interact with such special young women, to help them achieve their dreams. Less than 1% of females in Malawi ever finish university. And so the fact that I had the opportunity to help these girls in simple ways to achieve their dreams of becoming teachers, of becoming doctors, of becoming lawyers, wasn't rocket science. It wasn't changing things in huge ways, but it was the daily grind of doing what I could to make a difference. And this is the invitation that each one of us have. What I've learnt since returning from Africa in the middle of 2016 is that we don't necessarily need to go to a developing country to make a difference. We don't need to go to places where people are suffering from material poverty to change the world, because the call to make a difference is right where we are. The opportunity to make a difference is in our local area, our local community, with the people that we meet each and every day. God might be calling you to make a difference in your families, in your school communities, in your workplace. The challenge is, as people of faith, to look for ways that we can make that difference. Again, not by doing extraordinary things, but by doing the small things with love. Doing the small things like smiling at somebody, like saying thank you, like asking somebody how they are, and staying around long enough to genuinely want to know. At the moment, I'm very privileged in Australia to work for the St Vincent de Paul Society. And through my work with Vinnies, I've been able to see thousands and thousands of volunteers who make a difference each and every day. They don't do it in huge ways, but they do it by going to visit people in their homes and simply listening to their stories. Through the St Vincent de Paul Society, they tutor refugees. They assist people with low-income housing. They provide emergency relief to people who have nothing. They provide no-interest loans for people so that they can have fridges and washing machines and white goods. Thousands and thousands, millions and millions of people in our world, each and every day, are making that simple, small difference through leading lives of faith and good works. This is the invitation for each one of us. The invitation to not be satisfied with what we have. No matter how much we do to help others, there's always more. We can always love more. We can always serve more. We can always be more in helping those who are in greatest need. So I want to encourage you, while you are watching this series on making a difference, to reflect on your life. It's not about listening to my stories and saying, oh, that's Sister Mel, but I could never do that. I could never go to Africa. I could never run a secondary school. It's not about that. The inspiration for each one of us is to get in touch with the God within and listen to that voice of God, to see how we can make a difference in the world by doing the small things and doing them with love. We can't come to know how God calls us to make a difference without a personal relationship with God in prayer. And that needs time. I'm always saying to people I work with at the St Vincent de Paul Society that we can't give to others what we don't have. We can't pretend to make a difference depending on us ourselves, depending on our own egos, our own strengths, our own capacities. We need God's strength. We need God's grace. Because if we rely on ourselves to make a difference, we can only do so much. But if we get in touch with the God within, you'll see that you can truly do things that you would never, ever have imagined. If you get in touch with the God within, and all that God calls you to become, you can truly change the world. It might seem that the little that you do isn't much. I don't believe that we are called individually to end world poverty. We are called to be that drop in the ocean. What we do might seem insignificant, and probably it is in the grand scheme of things. But if each one of us is a drop in the ocean, we can truly move mountains. If each one of us does our part to plant seeds in the lives of others, we might never see the outcome. We might never be there to see the fruits of what we achieve in this lifetime. But we have to believe that we are seed planters. We are called to be the ones who try to bring hope into the lives of others, because we might never know what people are struggling with. I remember early on in my teaching career, there was a student at the school where I was teaching here in Brisbane, and every day he was late for school. After a few weeks, I got sick and tired of him coming late every single day. And I challenged him and I said, "You're always late for school. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your education. You need to get out of bed earlier so that you can get here on time." He answered me in a way that taught me a huge lesson. He said, "Sister Mel, you don't understand." He said, "I'm a refugee and I have 7 brothers and sisters. And before I come to school every morning, I have to get my 7 brothers and sisters out of bed. I have to feed them. I have to bathe them. I have to take them to school. And then I come to get my education." That taught me a lesson about not judging people by what you see. Because everybody has a story. Everybody has things going on for them in their lives that we might not even realize. And yet the invitation is, as I said, to plant seeds in people's hearts. That's how we make a difference. By encouraging people to be the best they can. By striving to empower others to make that difference by how we live our lives. It's easy to talk many words. It's easy to stand here and tell you these lovely stories. And yet what's important is not the words we speak, but how we live our lives. Saint Francis of Assisi said, "Preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words." This is a profound lesson, I believe, for each one of us, because it's about how we live our lives and the story that our lives tell. This is how we're going to make that difference for those people that we come into contact with. So I want to invite you, as I've said, firstly, to be serious about getting in touch with God in your life. To be serious about giving God time to speak to your heart. To be serious about that personal relationship with prayer, because God loves us more than we can ever imagine. I also want to encourage you that making a difference is about the small things, not only the big things. You might never know the difference you can make in someone's life just by living your own story in the best possible way. And finally, I want to encourage you to plant seeds in people's hearts. Seeds of hope, seeds of joy, seeds of love. Because ultimately, our God is a God of love, and our God is a God of surprises. I never knew that I would end up making a difference in the way that I do. So be open to how God seeks to transform your life. Be open to how God seeks to enable and use you to make a difference in our world. Be open to be the change in our world that you want to see. I look forward to seeing you again for the next episode as we continue to explore how each one of us can make a difference in our world. May God bless you and your families in the week ahead. Goodbye.
A lot of talk in our church today about the new evangelisation, and we might ask, well, what's new about the new evangelisation? One thing that's new is that we're trying to renew the faith in people who should already be Catholic, should already be Christian. Individuals, families, communities, whole cultures that need to rediscover the gospel. And so what's new is that they're getting a new shot in the arm of faith, of evangelisation. Another thing that's new about it is the way that we do that. And the new media and groups like Shalom World TV are very important for bringing the gospel anew to our cultures, to our families, to each of us individually. And so I encourage all the viewers of Shalom World TV, and I encourage Shalom World TV themselves to keep up the good work, to keep watching this channel and to keep up the good work of presenting the Catholic faith to our world today.